The NFC compared to the AFC is a much more top-heavy conference, and there are a couple of favorites that you expect to make deep postseason runs heading into the 2022 season. You can immediately think of who you expect to be competing for a trip to the Super Bowl this year when Championship Sunday rolls around, unlike the AFC where there could be a combination of countless teams, and you can realistically believe or talk yourself into thinking that any of these can happen. The phrase "any given Sunday" certainly applies, and the season obviously hasn't been played yet, but we will discuss the outlook of the NFC in 2022, and without further ado, let's begin. And we're going to start today's video with the defending NFC South champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and their outlook for the 2022 NFL season. Their season outlook became a hell of a lot brighter when Tom Brady announced he would be returning for his third season with the Buccaneers, less than 2 months after he announced his initial retirement. And what will greatly benefit Tampa is playing in the NFC South, as I'm probably going to shock you guys here with this spicy take, but I do believe the Bucs have at minimum 4 division wins with sweeps of both the Panthers and Falcons. And with only one bye week in the playoff format nowadays, having those division wins goes a long way, even more so than before, as every game counts and means that much more. The Bucs have a brutal start to their season though, as they play in Dallas and in New Orleans before coming home and have 2 straight home games against the Packers and Chiefs, and in terms of a 4-game start, it doesn't get much tougher than that. After that start though, they have a 3-game stretch against Atlanta, at Pittsburgh, and at Carolina, all of which should be wins. The Steelers game won't necessarily be easy, but in theory, should win. And the Bucs also have the luxury of finishing the year against the Panthers and Falcons, and while I'm not suggesting there's games players take off or there's easy games in the NFL, I would think at this point both of those teams, the Panthers and Falcons, will be eliminated from playoff contention and in a lot of ways want to get the season over with. And those 2 games heading into the playoffs should, in theory, benefit Tampa, because other teams like the 49ers, for example, who, by the way, went further than the Bucs in the postseason last year, last 2 games are in Vegas against the Raiders and home against the Cardinals. And even with Chris Godwin out for some of the season, Tampa is still going to be a good team, and there seems to be this opinion where people discredit them because the Rams beat them and that it's the end of the era and let's move the next team in. I don't think that's the case, and I do believe Tampa will be more than back in 2022. And next up is the Green Bay Packers, and we will dive into more than one team in a division to be clear. As Saints fans, I very much like what you guys have going on this year, but the Packers are up and they don't scare me anywhere close to what they did once upon a time. When you lose a receiver, in Aaron Rodgers' words, the best teammate he's ever played with, to go from him to Sammy Watkins and a second-round rookie in Christian Watson while trying to make a Super Bowl push, I'm not buying into what they did this past offseason. And having said that, it doesn't mean they're a 6-win team now and the Lions are taking over the North, as much as it is to say they are not being as taken as serious of a threat as they were a year ago at this point in time, due in large part to that. And I think Christian Watson can become a very talented receiver in this league and be a good player for the Green Bay Packers. But is he going to be anywhere close to Davante Adams, who over the past 2 years put up 29 touchdowns after he makes the jump from North Dakota State to the NFL? No, absolutely not. And he may be force-fed some, but the chemistry him and Aaron Rodgers will have will not be anywhere close to what it was between him and Davante. That took years to build up, and in their final game together, they put up 10 points in a home playoff game coming off of a bye. And we will briefly discuss the Minnesota Vikings for a few reasons. The first and foremost being they have a new head coach who players genuinely love to go to work for in Kevin O'Connell, and a coach who was with the Rams and Sean McVay over the past 2 years. Minnesota's defense last year also ranked 686th out of 686 possible teams in terms of touchdowns allowed in the final 4 minutes of halves in 2021, and that statistic goes back to the year 2000. This isn't an exaggeration to say, but if they ranked even half out of those teams, Minnesota very easily could have been an 11 or 12 win team last year. Will they make a deep postseason run this year? Probably not, because their corners are not great, but they do have a couple of things in their favor that you can't measure, and that's wanting to get up and go to work every day, and wanting to play for your head coach, and a much easier schedule than other NFL teams have. Detroit should be improved from 3 wins, as they had a very good offseason and draft. I like what Detroit is doing, and I think they are taking the consistent steps needed to become a relevant franchise and an organization that is turning around the culture. But I don't think they will seriously compete in 2022. And the Bears are in for a long year, and I don't have much more to say than that, honestly. We'll discuss them in depth in another video, but for now, they're not in a good situation. Next up is the NFC East, and more often than not, your team goes as far as your quarterback can take you, and we will be starting with the Washington Commanders. I am not a Carson Wentz supporter, and his stats last year certainly aren't bad from an efficiency standpoint, as he finished with a 27-7 TD to INT ratio, but time and time again he choked when they needed him most. See Week 18 against the Jags. The Colts blew a 20-point lead against the Ravens, and a 2-yard fourth quarter pick 6 against the Titans. I wish Carson and Washington the best, but I think their ceiling is an 8-9 win team, and ultimately believe they miss the playoffs. Now, for the New York Giants, and the quarterback certainly applies to them as well. What hinders Daniel Jones in 2022 is if he plays bad, or not even bad, but maybe not up to the standard that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen want him to, he will be replaced, as he was not their pick and they have absolutely zero ties to him. I love the Giants' future with players and building blocks like Andrew Thomas, Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Azeez Ojulari. While I believe in their future and believe in what Daboll and company will eventually do, I'm not a fan of their immediate future, and I'm also not a believer in the New York Giants in 2022. To me, their ceiling this year is in the 7-win area and another year of missing the playoffs. As for the Philadelphia Eagles, I loved their draft and thought they also had a good offseason, but now it is put up or shut up time for Jalen Hurts and the rest of the team. They lost by 16 points in the playoffs to the Bucs, and that was with an injury-riddled Tampa Bay team. While I also like A.J. Brown, there seems to be this belief that A.J. Brown is this top 3 or 4 receiver in the league, and he's not. And I'm not saying don't get excited about a player your team picked up, but Eagles fans seem to think he is among the Justin Jeffersons or Devontae Adams of the world. AJ is a good player, but he's not in that tier. As for Dallas, they are a good team, and the NFC Beast is a 2-team race between the Eagles and Cowboys, but can Dallas or Philly in 2022 realistically go into a Tampa or SoFi Stadium or Levi Stadium and beat one of those teams on the road? To me, the answer for this year is a resounding no, and I think both Dallas and Philly make the playoffs this year, with the furthest either one goes being the divisional round of the playoffs. And now we have arrived to the NFC West, where we will start with the Seattle Seahawks. Their quarterback room is Drew Lock and Geno Smith, and I already am not a believer in either one of these guys, much less in a division with the defending champions and an already good division. They are not going to go very far in 2022. The Cardinals, to me, are very much boom or bust, and at this point, based on what we've seen out of them over the first 3 years in the Cliff Kingsbury era, is they can't be trusted. They started out 7-0 last year, only to taper off and win 2 games after Thanksgiving, which were against the Bears and the Cowboys. They were smoked by 3 scores in Detroit and smoked by 3 scores in the first ever Monday night playoff game. I want Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins to thrive in the desert, as they would be an insanely fun duo to watch as one gets older and one hits his prime, and that very well could happen, but they also lost star pass rusher Chandler Jones and were already a fringe playoff team. This screams wildcard exit, especially when you factor in who is in their division. Again, at maximum. And the 49ers are up, and while Jimmy G is currently on the roster as I make this video, this is under the assumption Trey Lance is going to be starting games and that he is by then off the roster. San Fran cannot go into the year with Jimmy on the roster, and if they do, I think that's a disastrous ending in the near future. And hypothetically, if Trey Lance shits the bed or doesn't play well, they are still a solid enough team to where they can win 8 to 9 games and make the playoffs. And I just don't see any way Trey comes in next year and plays awful to the point where they'd bench him. That's the only way they don't make the playoffs, is if Trey Lance is just that bad. The Los Angeles Rams are defending Super Bowl champions for a reason, and Aaron Donald, or AD99, just received an extension, and deservedly so. He's a Hall of Famer 5 years after he retires, and you could make an argument he is still underpaid. Unless Matt Stafford has a season-ending injury this year, this team will be back and will at minimum make the divisional round of the playoffs. As cliche as this sounds, the one thing that scares me for the Rams is facing Tom and the Bucs in the playoffs again. Remember, they were an injured team when they faced them last year and nearly completed the comeback. And a quick side note, in real life I had a group message where one of my boys said to a Rams fan in the group message, "I've seen this enough, sorry for the pending loss." So again, as cliche as that sounds, I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucs beat them in the playoffs this year. Tom usually, though not always, gets the last laugh. The New Orleans Saints are going to make a lot of noise this year, but the quarterback situation, I think, holds them back a hair, as I don't think Jameis Winston is a Super Bowl winning player. If I had to predict right now, I think an NFC Championship game would feature the Bucs and the Rams, and I think Tom and the Bucs would go on to the Super Bowl. It wouldn't surprise me if the Rams went back-to-back with Super Bowl appearances, though. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, now is the time I ask you to please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as it would truly mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.